Order. Welcome to the Public Accounts Committee on Monday the 9th of February 2026. This afternoon we will be taking oral evidence for two separate inquiries, the first of which will focus on the new hospital programme. In 2020, the Department of Health and Social Care committed to building 40 new hostels by 2030 through the new hospital programme. This was intended to be a landmark programme to address the growing backlog of investment in hospital buildings. When the committee last reported on the subject in 2023, we found that serious doubts that the government would deliver on its promises and that swifter action was needed to address dangerous crumbling and rack in hospitals. In January 25, DHSC announced an updated plan of delivering a total of 46 new hospitals, including 5 that are already open. These hospitals are to be delivered over a longer timetable with proposed funding of £60 billion, double what was previously proposed, with the new programme extended from 2030 to 2045. So today's session will be an opportunity to assess the realism of the revised new hospital programme, challenge the department on the impact of delays and explore the risks of long-term delivery. It is essential that patients and all who work in the NHS have confidence in the delivery of this plan. So to help us with this, we are very pleased to have both the Permanent Secretary and the Chief Executive Officer with us from the department. So Samantha, if you would introduce yourself, then Sir Jim, and then Elizabeth, and then Paul and Charlotte, please.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name's Sam Jones. I'm the Permanent Secretary here at the Department of Health and Social Care, and for the committee to note, my husband is Chief Executive of Milton Keynes Hospital.
So on that subject, we recognise that potential conflict. We will not be asking any questions on individual projects in the southeast of England. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for being here. Sir Jim.
Hi, Jim Mackey, Chief Executive NHS England.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth.
Afternoon, Elizabeth Omani, Interim DG, Finance, Department of Health and Social Care.
Thank you very much. Paul.
Hi, Paul Mustow. I'm the Joint SRO for the new hospital programme in DHSC.
Thank you. And Charlotte.
Hello, Charlotte Taylor, the other Joint SRO for the new hospital programme, also in DHSC.
So, warm welcome to Paul and Charlotte, who is their first appearance. Hopefully you will find it useful and, I was going to say enjoyable, but worthwhile. So, thank you very much. So, I think it falls to me to ask the first question, probably to you, please, Permanent Secretary. We've now got a programme, as I say, for building 46 hospital schemes that will be delivered by 2045-6 and will cost no more than £60 billion. How much confidence can this committee have that massive programme will be delivered and will be delivered on time and on budget?
Thank you. We hope to take the committee through this afternoon the steps that we've taken around the improved governance and assurance around the programme, which we'll come on to. We were particularly pleased to have the NAO's recognition of the reset, so to speak, in terms of the programme more generally, in terms of both the approach to the RAC hospitals, in terms of the phasing and the additional investment that's been put into the programme itself. So we are confident that as the NAO has outlined, that we have a positive reset and a look forward. Having said that, we don't take that lightly, and we take the seriousness and the size and scale of the programme very seriously. So we have revised governance arrangements in place, particularly through the transition, which I know you'll want to come on to in a bit more detail later on.
So, a question on the RUC hospitals. You may or may not be aware of that the committee visited Hinchingbrook in Huntingdon and West Suffolk near Bury St Edmunds hospitals. Both were RUC. At that time, it was felt that those hospitals only had a life of till 2030. You've now had McDonald do a report and extended those life of those hospitals to 2032. Is this realistic, and are you realistic going to be on time to replace all the 7 RAC hospitals within that timetable?
if I start and then I'll hand over, if I may. So I think that we would all say that we do not take the issues of the RAC hospitals lightly. We take the issues of patient safety and staff safety and governance incredibly seriously. So that overrides everything that we do, including having an independent assessment through Mott McDonald's approach, confirming that those 7 hospitals are safe until 2030 and onwards. But in terms of, I'll hand over to Charlotte or Paul.
Yes, very happy to add to that. I think we certainly welcome the report. The report has suggested that all of the work that's gone into mitigating RAC in those hospitals has been successful. A huge amount of time and effort and money has gone into mitigation work at those hospitals, which has meant that they are safe to operate beyond 2030 and potentially for 6 to 10 years after that, as long as they are well maintained and they are monitored regularly and kept up to scratch. But that recognises that still poses an imposition on the trusts who are running those hospitals, and we're absolutely clear that we have to replace those hospitals as soon as we possibly can, and are now following the plan in the plan for implementation that's been published as part of the reset.
So, what happens? I don't mind who answers this. Maybe this is your bag, Sir Jim, I don't know. But the report makes clear that you've got smaller contingencies in the earlier years, building up to bigger contingencies in the later years. But the earlier years, if there is such a thing as a simpler project, the smaller projects anywhere in the earlier years, and the bigger, more complex ones are in the later years. So what reassurance can you give the committee that the smaller earlier years projects are not going to run over those contingencies, which are pretty small in some cases, and create a knock-on problem for the much bigger projects, bigger hospital projects in the later years?
Yeah, so again, I'll start off and hand back over to Paul, but I think that's covered in the revised governance arrangements and stronger oversight as part of the reset. So there'll be clearer, more agile oversight as things develop, more regular reports, more kicking of the tyres to make sure plans are realistic, and then our ability with other schemes to be able to nudge them back and forth to accommodate any movements. So, Paul, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, and just to add really that the key benefit of running it as a programme means that we can look at contingency across the programme as well. So the NAO flagged that there's around £12 billion worth of contingency across the programme, about 20% of the capital cost. Of that, 8 billion is centrally held to be allocated across the schemes, and we expect that contingency to be used more towards the middle and later periods of the programme, so into wave 1 and into wave 2, hence the lower contingency figures across the first 5-year period, but they then grow over the following 5-year periods. But that's in line with sort of the expectation around spend and around the nature of the schemes in the programme.
So will you be keeping a very close eye that we don't get this sort of knock-on effect that I was talking about? Because if it starts to go wrong in the first few projects, it will be wrong for the rest of the programme. Absolutely.
It's a full programme. So whilst it's divided into waves principally to match sort of funding requirements over those 5-year periods, we will manage it as a programme, and those schemes flow from wave 1 into wave 2 and wave 2 into wave 3. So absolutely.
Thank you very much. Matt, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I should declare that I have one of the hospitals in the programme in my constituency. So I'd like to ask about Wave 1. And first, if I could address the question to Paul and Charlotte. Can you tell me what you think the key challenges are that you face in delivering Wave 1 of the scheme to time and budget?
Perhaps if I'll make a start and then Paul might want to add to that. So I think we should be clear that Wave 1 schemes are big and complex, particularly compared to a number of the schemes that are currently being delivered through Wave 0. So there's an inherent risk and complexity there just through the nature of those schemes. As we've talked about already, 7 of those are the RAC replacements, so those are typically almost all of the buildings needing to be replaced rather than part of an estate. We're looking at what estate can be retained and doesn't need to be completely replaced, but again, typically more is needed there. So it's sort of the nature of the beast of them being in wave one that makes them big, generally bigger and more complicated.
Just to be clear, the report makes it clear that the biggest projects are towards the back of the programme. The Wave 3 and onwards programmes are the bigger ones. Is that not right?
They do get bigger throughout. Broadly, yes. It's not kind of a straightforward curve. They do tend to get put towards the back end, and part of that is because in doing the review of the programme, one of the factors that was looked at was deliverability, and again, the bigger schemes are the more complex to deliver. So they are further back in the waves system. Hopefully then they get to benefit from the learnings, not just of Wave 0, but also the delivery of the Wave 1 schemes should then enable the Wave 2s and the Wave 3s in turn to be delivered more effectively.
Very helpful, thank you. Matt?
Yes, sorry, just to, if I may, drill into a couple of points around this. So the new hospital design, of which some of the Wave 1 hospitals are going to be built to, has a sort of re-estimated completion date of spring 2026. Are you happy and confident with that at the moment in terms of timing?
Shall I start with that one?
Yeah.
Yes, we are. So Hospital 2.0 has been developed over the last few years, actually. It's been sort of been iterated and developed and extended. And this summer will mark the sort of conclusion of its both full completion but also mandation. So that's where we've been through all of the assurance processes needed, and then we'll be mandating it as part of the design of future hospitals. So, but that's not to say that's the start point. The design has been with trusts already for some time, and they've been using it to develop their business cases already. So we've been refining it and going through the sort of independent assurance process up to that point.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And section 2.9 of the report in relation to the RAC hospitals says that some of the RAC hospitals appear to be facing timetable pressures. I just wondered if you had anything that you wanted to touch on in that. Sorry, that was section 2.9.
Yeah,
9 on page 33.
Yes, thank you. I think, as Charlotte mentioned, all 7 of the RAC hospitals are all large complex schemes, as you'll be aware, and they're working their way through their business cases at the moment. So they're either at strategic outline case or they're at outline business case, 2 of the sort of early stages, but absolutely key stages where the size, scope, cost of hospitals of those hospitals will be finalised. So we're working through that process at the moment. We're on track with those, and we're on track for the start on construction dates currently that are within the plan for implementation. So whilst they're complex and whilst things can change, we feel that we're on track with those at the moment.
That's great, thank you. And that leads me very nicely to section 2.2, which states that hospital schemes take years to develop, and Fig 5 gives a really good, helpful indication of what that breakdown of timing is. Which I think there's an average of 8 years with a range of sort of 6 to 10 year spread. I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on what might cause the hospital to be at the 6-year end of the spread versus the 10-year end of the spread.
Will I start?
Yeah.
So as you say, it's quite a wide range. That does represent, so there's a range of different types of schemes, different sizes, different complexity, things like whether additional land needs to be purchased or whether it's being completely constructed on site. Yeah. So there's just a number of different circumstances that could lead a hospital needing a longer completion time to some of the other schemes.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt, very much. Blake, Steve.
Thank you. I don't have a hospital in Mid-Bedfordshire, but if you want to build a new one, you know where to come. But my constituents rely on the hospital in Milton Keynes, which I won't ask about for the reasons we discussed earlier, but also Bedford and Luton and Dunstable. Between the 2 of them, they have a maintenance backlog. I think the latest number that I saw in the region of £170 million. So my question is broader. It's not just focused on my constituents in Mid-Beds. How do you plan to ensure that hospitals outside of the new programme get the investment they need to operate effectively for constituents like mine who rely on hospitals with a very high maintenance backlog?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that one up. So more recently, obviously, we've had, through the spending review, confidence and clarity around the capital through the SR for the capital SR. So essentially of a £70 billion envelope over the time period, this is actually about the new hospital programme is about 13% of the total spend. So out with this, we've got a revised capital strategy now where a lot of this capital is going straight to providers to support not only backlog maintenance, but some of the transformational work that we've got ongoing. And through the new regional delivery model, we've also got an opportunity there to shape a more strategic response to some of the clinical strategies.
Thank you. Do you want to move on, Chair?
Very good. Thank you very much. We now come to Anna, please.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. My constituents in Shipley are served by Airedale Hospital, which is one of the RAC hospitals. I was fortunate actually to visit on Friday, met a construction T-level student, Leighton, and looked at the refurbishment that's happening to deal with the RAC, ward by ward on that site. One of the things I'd like to ask is, perhaps for Elizabeth, is how much more do you expect to spend on the sort of maintenance and refurbishment of the RAC hospitals before their replacements open? So obviously we're talking a lot about the funding set aside for the new hospital programme, but clearly there's a lot of spend still going on to remediate the RAC.
Yeah. So in total, I'm trying to quickly see if I can get the estimates. But the RAC trusts will actually receive around about, in total, across all of them, £440 million worth of operational capital. That's to address local infrastructure issues. Clearly, we're working very closely with the providers to try and find the most cost-effective solutions. Our preference would obviously be to build the RAC hospital sooner. But as I think Charlotte and Paul has described, the delivery speed is very much constrained by market capacity and the fact if we go a lot faster than we originally planned, then with the funding price profiles it's likely to push up the cost. So that's the approach that we've taken.
So coming to Charlotte and Paul, on the sort of market, do you have confidence that you're going to be able to deliver the RAC hospitals given constraints in terms of construction skills and construction companies who have the capabilities to deliver these large, complex new hospitals?
I start on that one. So we do. We're contracting with the market in a very different way under the new hospital programme. So we're just out to procurement at the moment for our own contractor framework, which is looking to extend the capacity of the market. We've been very pleased with the response we've had from the market around the volume of contractors that have put themselves forward, and we're looking to take 10 contractors forward into the framework. That will be awarded in the next couple of months, and we'll start to be able to allocate contractors to schemes. That brings in additional capacity from Europe, for example, so large European contractors who are already building hospitals on the continent, and that combined with UK capacity will give us the sort of capacity we need. The other key thing to mention is the way the standard design works is we're able to consolidate the need across all of the hospitals in the programme and start to put that out to the supply chain and to the market in a very different way as well, giving confidence in the pipeline of work that's coming and allowing firms to gear up and scale up to deliver all the sort of key components of the hospitals that we'll be building. So we've got a very different approach to the market, and we have confidence that that's building the capacity we need, but recognising that it's still a very challenging market in the UK alongside all the other things that are happening, both public sector and private sector in the construction industry. But we're working very hard to build the capacity.
So by capacity, you're obviously talking there about companies and a procurement framework. I guess I'm talking about the actual skilled labour force. So how are you ensuring social value, even if you're using overseas suppliers, to ensure that those are good jobs for local people like Leighton who can get training and get on a career path in construction?
Absolutely. So even though there'll be, as I mentioned, bringing in additional capacity, they will still use lots of local suppliers, and a key part of the framework is social value is at its heart. And that will be around skills and around training, and we have an academy that we're developing as well that will develop the skills we need for those roles. But it also develops the local supply chain. So the big contractors will subcontract out key components, which will then be sourced locally as well. So these hospitals have a big footprint locally and in the local economy and in the national economy, actually. So we're looking to leverage that as much as possible.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. So just moving on to Hospital 2.0, my colleague asked about the impact of the delays to getting this Hospital 2.0. I'd just like to probe a little bit further about the Hospital 2.0 design. There are a number of elements to it, single rooms, 100%. I just wondered to what extent the 2.0 design was really going to deliver for the patient of the future, being older, frailer, more likely to have dementia, often at the end of life, possibly needing rehabilitation as well as treatment. Can you give us confidence that the Hospital 2.0 design with 100% single room occupancy is actually suitable for the patient, the majority of the patients who actually are going to be in our hospitals, who are there today? 60% of hospital bed days are frail older people.
Maybe I could start by outlining some of the feedback and sort of the engagement that's gone into developing those designs, and then Paul might have some more kind of technical points to add as well. So the designs have been really carefully tested and probed and shared with clinical leaderships, with sort of allied health professionals such as the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, as well as sort of specialist organisations including patient groups, patient voice groups, and you mentioned dementia. So there's been some work with some dementia organisations for things like, we call it pathfinding, so being able to navigate your way around the hospital in a sensible way to make sure that this is built into the designs from the outset. The hospitals are intended to be much more intuitive than at the moment when you typically go into a hospital and there's sort of a mishmash of buildings that have been added on over time, and it's not always very easy to simply find your way from the front door to where you need to go. So by building this into the design from the start, they should be much, much more user-friendly.
Okay, so in the report it mentions fully assured design April 2026 following market testing. Is the market testing it with patients and professionals and the people who are going to have to work in it and be treated in it, or is that market testing with the builders?
It's both, actually, because if you look at Hospital 2.0 as a system rather than as a design, it's all the way through from clinical requirements and working with clinicians and patients and staff through to building designs and then through to operational procedures. So it's the whole thing. It's a system. So it's been, as Charlotte mentioned, it's been extensively tested and developed with users, clinicians, stakeholders. It's then been sort of unpicked and unpacked to work with the market, contractors, suppliers, subcontractors, about how to best build and deliver it. And then it's also then plugged into the operation of the hospital. A big component of Hospital 2.0 will be the digital component. So how those hospitals are used in future and which digital technologies are rolled out through the system will all help on that process of keeping it future-proof and thinking about future use.
So just the last point, the future-proofing. We're not very good, or haven't been in the NHS necessarily, in looking into the crystal ball. The hospitals won't come on stream, some of them, until 2036 beyond. So from locking down a design in 2026 to the thing opening in 36 and hopefully still being operational in 2056 and beyond, are you building in sufficient flexibility and adaptability to allow technological and clinical changes to be reflected in how the hospital is used in future?
Yes, absolutely. a key part will be learning lessons as well as we go. So obviously we'll be building in waves, and we'll be able to learn lessons from the waves that have been completed. And as they go into operation, we can learn lessons further from those into future waves. And as you'll know, each scheme will have its own business case. So as we go through the business cases in later years, we'll be able to adapt those and incorporate the lessons learned, so that they are, again, they've learned from the past and they're fit for the future.
I look very much forward to seeing the new Airedale Hospital and maybe being a patient there one day.
So we'll all come and visit. Paul, you're a chartered engineer, I believe. This is a big, rapid programme, 41 hospitals in the next 20 years. Is there going to be sufficient building and skills capacity out there to deliver that size of programme in that timetable?
I think we've touched on that a little bit already. I think the capacity is a challenge. I think the approach we've taken to procuring the contractors and to a different way of contracting as well. So it's called the Hospital 2.0 Alliance, which we're developing, which is very much working collaboratively with the supply chain and with contractors to make sure that risks are properly apportioned between us as the clients and the contractors. And that is attracting more contractors back into the health market, whereas we'd seen contractors sort of leaving the health market before. So it's elements like that. It's the standard designs, which again gives, as I mentioned earlier, contractors a good view of the future, of the pipeline of work, and can give them confidence that this is coming. It's worth investing. So it's a combination of those things that we've put in place. As I mentioned, though, that said, it's still a complex market. It's still a challenging market. And we're keen to make sure that contractors and the wider supply chain see building hospitals as a really valuable and worthwhile thing to do.
You're a chartered surveyor. I declare my interest as a chartered surveyor, so I know how to build things. Are you confident that when you're ready to press the start button for each of those projects, all what I call the pre-contract issues will have been resolved on each project, things like planning permission, specifications, designs, even pre-contract work, demolishing the old buildings or whatever it is? Are you confident that each trust is working up so that it knows what those pre-contract works are, so that when the button is pressed, the contract will be ready to go, properly tendered, ready to go?
Yes. I mean, that's the plan. So the plan we laid out in the plan for implementation sets out the envelope of start dates. So we've put those as an envelope, which is a range of start dates, because they're still relatively early in their business case journey. As we move towards the outline business case and then full business case, the costs will then be tied down, and the final programme will be tied down. So that approach gives us the sort of certainty we need in terms of those individual scheme programmes. But in the meantime, we then work with the trust very closely to understand the specific needs of their site, whether that is a hospital that's staying on its existing site and needs to do master planning, or whether it's a scheme where we're looking to purchase a new site and build from scratch on a new site. They're very different, as you say, and planning requirements are very different. So each one has its individual attention, and we work very closely with the trust to make sure that those plans are realised.
And perhaps I could just add.
Sorry, of course.
So perhaps I could just add to say that work is happening in the trusts now, the Wave 1 trusts. So things like building car parks, helipad, I believe, at King's Lynn, for example, demolition work. There's a lot of enabling works, as we call them, going on across Wave 1, and indeed in some cases some Wave 2 and Wave 3 schemes are also undertaking that enabling work where it's sensible for them to do so.
King's Lynn is one of those where the car park needs to be demolished, the multi-storey. And is that actually started now?
It hasn't started yet.
When will it start?
It's later this year.
Thank you very much. Clive, please.
Right. NHS England has been abolished and rolled into the department, the functions. Therefore, there's a recruitment freeze, as I understand it, in NHS England. That's hardly the ideal circumstances to embark on a major new programme.
We have a revised set governance arrangements in place now, and we'll have them through the transformation programme, including Elizabeth as the Interim Director General, with responsibility to myself and Jim directly for the new hospital programme. And in any scenario, there will be a Director General for Finance who will be responsible for the programme. We also have, NHS England have a board chaired by a non-executive director and programme management structures underneath. In terms of the arrangements for individual staff and staffing as a programme moving forward, we will be flexible around the type of skill sets that are required between now and this year, next year, going through the detail of what type of skills are needed to make sure the programme is delivered in the way that needs to be delivered, and that's what Elizabeth will be taking forward.
And just to add, so there was a slight pause, but actually we're not delaying recruitment into the new hospital programme into specific roles. So working very closely with the team, we're looking at priority roles, so we've been recruiting into those, and also we've been trying to move from a more outsourced model to an in-house model, recognising the longevity of the scheme, so we're building that skill and capability. There are some outsourced roles we will continue with. Seems very appropriate given the nature of the work, so some technical skills, some commercial skills, but it makes sense to actually buy those in. But that work is ongoing, and also, if I may, as a consequence of the 50% headcount reduction in core NHS England, we're also looking to see, are there some existing staff within core NHS England that would have the skills as we pivot into delivery to move across into some of the new hospital vacancies. So making sure we don't make people redundant with the skills that we could redeploy into the programme.
Right, so there's no vacancies currently, therefore, that are affecting the new hospital programme?
There's no vacancies at the moment that are key roles that we are not looking to fill. There are some roles we've gone out to advert to fill, and we haven't been able to fill them immediately, so we're going round the loop again.
There's none where there's actually a freeze on recruiting?
No, not for key roles, no.
So essentially, therefore, you've got, as far as you can in terms of being able to recruit, all the staff that are necessary to advance this programme?
Yes, and or if we can't recruit because people haven't been applied or they haven't got the appropriate skills, then through our delivery partner, we're working to fill those gaps in the short term. But I don't see resourcing as a concern at the current time for delay in the programme.
Can I just challenge that, Elizabeth? I'm sure what you're saying is right, but paragraph 3.29 on page 48 of the report says the risk of public sector vacancies on deliverability is rated red and capabilities impacted including digital and IT, legal and commercial project delivery, technical and industry knowledge and analysis. Are you really saying that you've not got a shortage in any of those skills?
So at the time that the report was written, we had key gaps. We have been on a recruitment drive, and we've been looking at how do we move staff from within NHS England across into core roles. So that as of now, and I spoke to Natalie Forrester, lead of the programme, to ask and just double check before I came in today, and she said, of course we'd like to fill all of our vacancies, but we've filled all of the key roles at the current time to deliver this programme. Clearly, we've got a vacancy rate which is, I think, at the time of writing the report was 39%. That's subsequently reduced. We will continue to recruit in the same spirit. We are recruiting into the SRO role for the new hospital programme in itself.
Thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful. Thank you. Anna, please.
Yes, just picking up another aspect of the future demand projections, which is about the assumptions about bed capacity and the shift to the community. So obviously the number of overnight beds is assumed to be, I think, an average of 6% for hospitals built under 2.0. There's a question locally about investment, for example, in a Keighley Health and Wellbeing hub that's predetermined sort of that some more activity will happen in the hospital, but that's not funded as part of the new hospital programme. So can you give me some assurance as to how you're going to deliver the additional capacity outside of hospital to make it actually work, that these new hospitals are going to be big enough? I don't know, Jim, if you wish to start.
Yeah, so that's really at the heart of the neighbourhood development and the 10-year plan development. Colleagues are working on that now, as we discussed last time, the medium-term planning process. So starting to build the frameworks and the foundations to shift care in the way that you've described. And the planning process then for the new hospital programme has to be adaptable to local circumstances. So the hospital modelling has to understand what's being built outside of hospital and changes to pathways, which I think is actually one of the strengths of the project.
Will there be capital funding prioritised for the community capacity where that has to be brought on stream in order for the new hospital?
We've got to connect all these things up. There is capital investment for neighbourhood schemes. Yep. We're expecting colleagues in the service to get the investment decisions right, to start building services to stop patients having to go into hospital and be cared for more locally. And it's our job to just join all those things up. So in the approvals process locally with ICBs, trusts, and then our regional teams, and then we will get involved also if it looks like it's out of sync.
Okay. Do you want to add anything about the programme dependencies between your programme and the neighbourhood programme, how you're handling that?
Yes, very happy to. I mean, just to echo what Jim said, really, that the hospitals need to sit within that ecosystem and obviously need to reflect the shift of the community and the sort of left shift that you'll have heard of separately. So one of the key elements for us is the demand and capacity modelling work that goes into the business cases for each hospital. Yep. So that very much looks at obviously what the right size of the hospital should be, bearing in mind both sort of factors that push the growth in size, but also factors that push the reduction in size for moving things out to the community. So that all gets factored into our demand and capacity modelling. I think when we came to, or when NAO reported last time, there was a concern that hospitals would be too small. Yeah. I think that's been addressed through the demand and capacity work. But obviously now the emphasis again is on making sure there's the right balance between sufficient capacity for the future, but also the sufficient and correct interaction with the system and the shift towards neighbourhood and community. So that all goes into the work that is behind the business cases for each scheme.
We hear a lot about optimism bias. How can you be sure you stress testing the assumptions in your demand and capacity model that you're not being overly optimistic? We've seen it before that we don't get the shift left into the community. So what stress testing are you doing to make sure you haven't got an optimism bias within your model?
Good question.
So,
do you want to pick
so the model itself, I can't claim to understand the detail of it because it's a very complicated model. However, the World Statistical Society awarded it Florence Nightingale Award for Healthcare Statistics. So I'm hoping that they understand what's in behind it and have tested those assumptions. I will say that the demand and capacity modelling, we don't just do it once and then say, right, that's the number that goes into the scheme. It's repeated at various points throughout the process. As we said before, it's quite a lengthy process to develop a hospital, so we keep doing it to check that the numbers are still right, that the assumptions that have been made are coming to fruition, that we're learning lessons from the hospitals that are a bit further down the line. And I think as Jim and Paul both said, that the kind of the whole ecosystem, everything needs to be working together, and that's sort of our job to make sure that that is happening properly.
I was just going to say, when it flows through the governance system as well, it won't all sit within the project, so there'll be different levels of challenge on it. So when it comes into the joint exec team, then eventually flows into NHS England board or the governance in the department, there'll be other challenges where we would expect to get really challenged on whether we're being over optimistic, and therefore it'll fail later on.
I'm hoping that whoever succeeded me as the chief analyst will be doing their job to make sure that all of the modelling is properly quality assured. But it would just perhaps be useful to have a note to understand exactly what the QA is for that demand and capacity, given it is so critical, and we do know that sometimes those assumptions, are not necessarily as evidence-based or challenged. In the detail they sometimes need to be. So it would be great, Chair. I don't think we've probably got time for much more, unless Elizabeth, you just had a final point.
Just to say, I have looked at the model, and actually it's good, and there's a lot of scenario planning in there, and we're trying to have kind of real world reality of, if we don't get the left shift, what does this look like? If we do, how do we? And that's, I think, the benefit of Hospital 2.0, because it's very much it's not a single rigid specification. It's something that you can adapt to the demand, that you can adapt to the clinical model. So you can move, and there's some non-clinical space built into the hospital designs as well, so there's an opportunity to flex. So very, very alive to that, because as you say, history, we can't have history repeating itself.
Thank you, We'll give that flex. Does each hospital has a separate business plan? In that business plan, is there a different probability ratio, or is it the same probability ratio across the whole hospital building programme?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think some of the factors will be consistent. So things like bed occupation utilisation will be consistent. Other factors around demographic growth, nature of the local population will be different. But we can explain all of that in the letter if you would like us to write you on the sort of nature of the model.
This is the Treasury model for managing public money that sets out how these P numbers ought to be. And what I'm interested to know is whether you've got one for the whole programme or whether there are different ones for each programme.
We will come back and confirm.
Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Anna, very much. Clive, please.
Just following, I'm still not quite got my head around this, sort of figures 12 and 13 in the report. Bearing in mind the Secretary of State's mission to transfer care from hospitals into the community, we've got their indications in 13, figure 13 about length of stay being reduced, more care in the community rather than hospitals, higher bed occupancy, yet page 12 shows more hospital beds. The two don't seem to sit alongside each other.
I can start on that if you like. So in terms of the growth, obviously, as I mentioned, when NAO looked at the programme in 2023, there was a concern around over optimism around which was driving hospitals to be smaller. And I think we've gone back and reviewed all of the inputs to the model, including reducing bed occupancy from 95%, which was seen as overly optimistic, to 92%, which is seen as more standard, which then has pushed the bed numbers up by, on average, around 6% across the programme, and that has felt that's felt reasonable to address that future-facing potential demand and thinking about future sort of demographic growth. The flip side, as we've mentioned earlier, is then working on it individually through each business case to look at the local ecosystem and what can be moved to the left and what can be moved outside of those hospitals into the community. And that work is built into the business case process for each of those schemes. You'll notice the NAO have picked out some of the numbers for individual schemes. Leighton, for example, on figure 12, which shows a significant increase in bed numbers, is already working those numbers down as part of their business case process. So we're expecting there will be an increase in bed numbers, but it won't be as large as the percentage there when that is locked down in their full business case, which will be in a little while yet.
Right. There's going to be more beds than there are now.
Across the hospitals, yes.
Why, when we're trying to move care into the community?
It's often, I mean, I know, chip in this as well. Generally, the biggest variable in these sorts of models is underlying growth. So we're making lots of changes to patterns of care, but there's an underlying growth anyway in demand, etc. So these changes have to outweigh that demand and further in order to reduce beds overall. And then there'll be specific local circumstances as well that will be driving specific issues in the model.
So the idea, therefore, that we're going to fund an increased demand for community care and primary care by reducing spending on hospital care is not likely to happen, is it?
Generally, it's still a big part of our plan and part of the 10-year plan. This is one specific component of that, but it is still generally the intention that we will go beyond underlying growth and actually shift patterns behind that. We haven't yet set specific objectives for the service in quantifiable terms for neighbourhoods to deliver those reductions in percentage terms, but that's our aim. The challenge we've got is nobody's actually managed to do it on a scale.
But it seems the obvious place to start is by providing fewer beds in new hospitals, isn't it? If that's what we're going to do the transfer.
I think there's a staging point as well. So at the point that the new hospital programme bed numbers have come through from individual sites. Clearly, the approach to neighbourhood health services is in development, and this is the bit of work that we're going to be doing through the demand and capacity review to see if this is the right size of hospitals, or we can do them on a smaller base at a reduced cost. So that's the further work that would happen on a scheme by scheme basis.
So these figures are not therefore definite yet. These figures.
We've got an envelope, and yeah, absolutely. So they're indicative at the start of the process, but we're going to continue to work on a site-by-site basis.
The other bit to add, which I know I'm sure will go into the next session, is the model of care associated with delivering the shift into the community that was set out in the 10-year plan, is where there is a focus on those individuals who are better treated outside of a hospital as opposed to those that need to be in a hospital. That doesn't take away Jim's point about the underlying demand, but the model of care of treating people and keeping them as safe as possible in the home is what neighbourhood health is about, and I know that we'll come on to frailty in a bit more detail.
Is all that work going to be done by the time you actually decide what the size of these new hospitals should be?
That work is underway already, quite significantly underway already, in terms of what does a model of care look like from a frailty perspective, how many people, where are they best treated, and then on top of that, as Jim said earlier, bringing together the plans for hospitals and also plans for what's going on in the community and cross-referencing to make sure in a local system that actually does make sense. And also, I'm sure Jim or Elizabeth will talk about the mid-year planning framework.
Yeah.
So through the medium-term planning process, clearly some of these schemes are happening in the next 3 years. So we are testing the assumptions around both from a revenue and a capital perspective in terms of the bed capacity, in terms of the models of care. We've got some outpatient work that is underway. So effectively those clinical strategies we are testing against the programme business cases that are starting to come through. But as Charlotte and Paul have described, that work will start. Some of that work will start in earnest with the indicative envelopes starting for wave 1 from the spring or April. Sorry,
wave 1 have indicative envelopes for cost and broadly for size, but that will get refined throughout the business case development process.
It's also worth emphasising that it's not a static process. So there wasn't a point in time where, and this has happened previously in previous regimes, there'd be a number fixed for bed numbers, and then whatever happens then just becomes the excess that you have to manage. This will be constantly reassessed right up until the point that things are pinned down contractually, with a degree of flexibility then to adapt as well.
A lot of work to do, isn't there?
Absolutely, it's never open, and I've been involved in building a lot of hospitals. You never get it absolutely right. It's how you adapt to changes right at, in real life as the things being open.
Thank you, Clive. Sarah Olney, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mustow, you were talking about the Hospital 2.0 to my colleague Anna Dixon. How will you know when these start to be implemented, start to be used by patients? What metrics are you going to use to measure whether they are in fact delivering improved patient care and workforce well-being?
So thank you for the question. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, it's a system. So we're looking to obviously build in those the sort of clinical benefits from the outset, build those into the design, and then that runs into the operation of hospitals, of the hospitals themselves. And obviously we're looking for the benefits around shorter stays from being in single rooms, for example, and improved figures around hospital-acquired infections, for example. So looking to drive those down. So we'll be looking to measure those and monitor those going forward, and make sure that the benefits are being delivered. As part of the business case, and the NAO reported, you'll have seen that we estimate around there'll be about £7.5 billion worth of additional benefits from a combination of all of those things.
Additional benefits
from the programme.
And so the shorter stays and the reduced infection are part of that £7 billion.
They are. So it all adds up as part, from the sort of design and construction, but also the operation gets rolled into those additional benefits. The other thing we're doing already is learning from schemes that have already implemented things like single bedrooms. So Royal Liverpool, for example, has single bedroom approach already. We're working closely with their teams to understand how it's working, how it works in terms of staffing, monitoring, and sort of utilisation, and feeding that into the design as well. So it's going to continuously evolve as we go forward.
And what have been the findings around workforce wellbeing with that single room model?
I think it's it's been reasonably positive. Probably see if Charlotte has anything to add to that, but I think yes, there's a sort of staffing element to that, but also the sort of wider use of the hospital and wider use of systems, and obviously the Hospital 2.0 design will add on top of that as well and bring in new, for example, digital systems in terms of how those are used going forward. So we're sort of trying to build on the best practice so far. But sorry, Charlotte, over to you in terms of
I can add a bit more colour to that perhaps. And so you know that in Royal Liverpool there's been some exercise to try and capture staff experiences. I think they've been broadly positive, including from people who were sceptical, because it's a very different way of nursing, for example. But they're sort of seeing the benefits of operating in that way, and so clearly there's lots of lessons there to be learnt. I think it's worth pointing out that as part of the Hospital 2.0 standardised designs, we're mandating that about 6-7% of the hospital should be reserved for workforce spaces. So if you talk to people who've worked in hospitals who don't typically always have somewhere to go to sit down, to have a drink, to just sort of have space away from patients. And actually we think this is really important. I think sort of some of the lessons learned from other schemes, but also some of the lessons that were learned during the pandemic, actually about having a supported workforce helps you operate a hospital more effectively. So we think this is a kind of a really core tenet of the approach.
It's not so much in Hospital 2.0, it's not so much that the single patient room model is better for staff, but that elsewhere in Hospital 2.0 there are more spaces for staff, and that will boost their well-being.
I think it's sort of an overall, but I think all the things kind of come together.
Thank you. And can you also tell me what measures are you going to use to assess whether the programme's delivering economic efficiencies for NHS trusts, this Hospital 2.0 approach?
Do you want to talk about running costs?
So the actual running costs of the buildings, obviously a more efficient and effective model that and the approach that's been taken. Actually, some of the patient indicators that you talk about around length of stay, throughput, flow, infection. There's the water systems that are used within Hospital 2.0, and actually, so looking at the model, it looks quite a lot more cost effective. We are overseeing then, in terms of the running costs, in terms of some of the staffing metrics.
Sorry to interrupt you, but this is the model is showing you that it's going to be more economically efficient. How will you measure, once they're up and running, how will you measure that it's delivering economic efficiencies?
So making sure that we're effectively using the asset more efficiently, so through throughput effectively, and looking at the standard productivity metrics that you would apply, and comparing it against standard operating models that we've got currently operating in our trust sector.
And just to add to that, I would expect it's similar to the quality impacts that were discussed earlier on. As we get nearer to opening, our oversight regime needs to be a bit more sensitive to the specific aspects of these business cases, so that it's clear, it's more transparent what's been delivered versus what was planned, and that we can, through our oversight mechanisms, be able to respond if any of the key assumptions go adrift or it's not quite having the impact that's described.
So I can understand how this approach will obviously reduce infections and hopefully reduce hospital stays. Will you have a mechanism in place to capture whether there are perhaps unexpected downsides to this approach? Sir Jim?
Yeah, I hope so. On your experience points, NHS England boards just resolved to proceed to the patient experience, building a systematic approach to patient experience, and appoint a new patient experience director as soon as we can. keen as well to extend the staff experience work as well to bring more data and more real-time analysis to what's actually happening. But you make a very good point. There's been around the UK examples where you can deliver the core aspects of a scheme and the core assumptions hold, but some unpredicted or adverse consequence becomes apparent, and that's all going to be down to us in our oversight regime, local oversight, board oversight, our oversight mechanisms, connections with others in the system, etc. So that if it's easier to see if it's in a hard metric, infection rates or ED performance or discharge rates. So it's a bit harder if it's experiential. So we do need to get these other mechanisms in place.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We'll look at this carefully and see where we get to with our report. Mike, finally, please.
Yep, final set of questions. You'll be aware that some hospital trusts have raised concerns about the new design perhaps being more expensive to run than existing hospitals. Could you just walk us through how you're addressing NHS trusts' concerns that the new hospitals will be more expensive to run? And it might be one for Paul and Charlotte. Is it, or if it's someone else?
I think probably how you've dealt with the responses, those kind of responses first, then Elizabeth and I can pick up on what we do about it, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can start. Do you want to start, Charlotte?
Yeah, I can start.
Briefly, please, because we're getting the clock is going. We've got a lot to get through yet.
So the programme's developing a sort of standard operating model. So how the hospital will actually work, and then developing with the trust a target operating model. And this is part of the overall business case process. So as well as working out how big the hospital will be, how many beds it will be, the running costs will be part of that assessment. So making sure, as part of that assurance process, that they're economically viable product schemes to run as well.
Mm-hmm. Anything further to add, Paul?
No, I think that was it from sort of the programme level, but I think
great. And yeah.
So I was just going to pick up one of the common things that comes through with single rooms, for example. I've worked in a couple of hospitals with very high rates of single rooms. Is generally you get very good satisfaction levels from patients, and staff enjoy working with them, but it is a bit harder. The staff can be more expensive to staff, certainly in the short term. And the Royal Liverpool have reported that to us in our general discussions with them about the financial position, etc. They're quite confident that it'll level out over time, and generally you can kind of level out, but it takes a bit of getting used to it. So we'll be all over this through the oversight regime, and when colleagues flag something that's a specific issue in terms of running cost, we'll have to work with them to try and resolve it.
For those of us that don't work in this industry, could you just explain how you expect it to level out over time? Because for me, if you've got a hospital with 500 beds, you've always got a hospital with 500 beds.
Yeah.
How does the staffing level out so that you get a better value over the long run?
Generally, the issue at first is observation. Sam's in it. It wasn't her, so she can chip in, but your oversight of patients is easier if you're in a bay, where you can observe more patients behind closed doors. That sometimes it was harder, but it's also a bit unnerving for staff initially. They have to do more checks. They've got to be more structured around the checks. And so that can produce extra costs short term until you develop a model that allows you to do it on a like-for-like basis.
Which is where the digitisation comes in. So Jim's absolutely right. When you're used to working in a different way with a ward that you can see people, and then you move to single rooms, you're relying on observations that are given to you in a different way. So use the digital, making sure that the information comes through. So it's supporting the staff and on the change as well. And we've got models up and down the country as well as globally where that is very, very normal.
Yeah. I've got a feeling Anna may want to come in with a question.
Very briefly, the time is going.
It's just the risk of that surely is that you end up with nurses sitting behind computer screens looking at. So how do you maintain human contact? What might be more efficient may actually be detrimental to other outcomes.
You still have to go in. You're right to the risk, but you still have to go in and see a patient. You still have to be able to talk to them. That still absolutely happens. But what it does help you do is identify those people who need to be and have that access more quickly. So the productivity associated with it doesn't take away from the human contact. You absolutely have to go in.
So 2 very quick questions from me, and then we'll finish on this session and take a break. Firstly, how will you keep Parliament informed the start and completion dates of each of these 41 hospitals?
In whichever way you would like us to do so, we can either do that on an ongoing basis, on a quarterly basis, we can update you as to the programme, or we can do that on specifics.
I think we'll think about that in our report, if we may.
Yep.
And finally, a very short, quick question. You know the committee's been to Denmark, where they've literally bulldozed all their regional hospitals, built 9 major hospitals, less hospital beds, all to a standard design. Have you sent teams over to Denmark to look at all these things?
We have.
What lessons have you learned?
So there was a DHSE trip to Denmark in 2023, I think the back end of 2023, not just looking at hospitals, but looking at the kind of wider changes that they'd made to their to the health system more generally. I think some specific things they learnt was that the team there delivering the Danish super hospital programme wished they'd done more in standardisation. They have built sort of all those hospitals individually, and so they were very much of the standardisation is the way. If they were doing things differently, that they might look at that. And then the sort of broad point with international comparisons is it's really hard to compare like with like, because the country, the demographics, the size is so different to England that there's sort of a limit to some of the things you can learn from these trips.
The key difference from what we've discussed today and what they've done is they ended up at 9 major programme hospital with less beds than they started, and because presumably they made greater assumptions about care in the community. So if, in addition, Permanent Secretary, to your note on finances, we could have quite a detailed note, because it's absolutely critical to this programme how much, what assumptions you're making about the size of these hospitals, and the reasoning behind it and the research that you've done would be really, really helpful. Can I thank you all very much today? Some of you will be remaining for the next session on frailty. To the rest of you, can I thank you very much for your time. We will resume, I think, at about 22, sharply by 22 if we can, please. Order.